This week in the Bible, we talked about the second chapter of Genesis and what happened particularly on the sixth day of creation when God put Adam in the garden and fashioned for him a wife out of his rib. What I'd like to focus on today in particular is the location of the garden as it's described as being the source of these four rivers. The location of Eden provided a particular challenge. In particular, it describes it as having four rivers flowing out of it, the Pishon and the Gihon, which are uncertain of their location. And of course, we know of the Tigris and Euphrates up in the northern part of going around Mesopotamia. But it says that the Gihon was down in the land of Cush, which is way, way far away from the Tigris and Euphrates. Some of the theories about location of Eden are that it was in the Persian Gulf area. Up in here seems where most of it is, but this reference to Cush is troublesome, to say the least. The other one, the Pishon River, is said to go around the land of Havalia, which is uncertain of that location either. But it could be in Arabia somewhere near modern day Kuwait, perhaps, is one of the predominant theories on that one. But as we had spoken about, I think this is indicative that the Garden of Eden is covered the whole world, I think, in a certain sense, right? Certainly the geography changed quite a bit after the flood. Some of the rivers maybe changed their routes, or who knows, a lot of the Earth's geography changed with the flood. But theologians and scholars of the Bible have said for thousands of years that there is a sort of a cosmic temple imagery that is going on with the garden. The garden was the first temple of God. It was certainly a geographic place, but I think to think of it as being, a small walled garden like you might find at Buckingham Palace or something like that is a bit anachronistic. Certainly the garden covered the whole world in a certain sense, right? The whole world was perfect and unfallen. And so it makes sense that it would be described as covering the whole ancient world. If you look into Revelation chapter 21, as it describes the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven, this is just kind of an interesting point that I'd like to bring up. It says in verse 15, "And one spoke with me, had a measuring rod of gold, and measured the city and its gates and its walls. The city lies foursquare, its length the same as its width. The measure of the city was with the rod was 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal." Right, so it's kind of described as a perfect cube with length, height, and width all being equal. About 12,000 stadia each. That's equivalent to about 1,380 miles. Now, clearly this isn't the sort of normal dimensions of a temple. It's way too big for a temple or a city or a kingdom or anything. 12,000 is obviously a symbolic number for the 12,000 tribes, or the 12,000 from each tribe, and so on and so forth. 12 being the number of the church, and 1,000 being sort of a vast number. So it's a symbolic number for sure. But if you lay out, just kind of for scale, that 12,000 stadia, or 1,380 miles, it's about 7 inches on this ruler, right? So this is a massive temple that covers literally like that entire ancient world from the Persian Gulf even down to Cush, where it describes the garden. And so, of course, there's a lot of symbolism and theological sort of meaning kind of going into it here. So it's not sort of a literal description of a literal temple, but I think the illustration shows that the garden, the rivers of the garden, span the whole world. And that's maybe the way to understand the Garden of Eden is that it's not, a little cute little garden that they were sort of kicked out of that we could kind of find today. But in a sense, it was the entire pre-fall world. And leaving that garden, there's a certain physical, sort of natural reality to that for sure. But there's also, maybe more importantly, a spiritual reality that thorns and thistles now grew up. The whole world was no longer unspoiled, a perfectly curated garden, but now it was subject to toil and to suffering and death. I'd like to share also a little bit of what Luther says about the location of the garden and these rivers. It's kind of interesting, but it kind of shows the vastness of this geological area as well. But he says in his lectures on Genesis that the Pishon or Ganges is still the same so far as the name is concerned. But if you consider its attractiveness, its productiveness, its good qualities, and its course, there's almost nothing left of this noble river. He says Havalia is India, located in the Orient. Scripture extols it for its wealth of both passages and elsewhere. He talks about the jewels and various things there in India and how that's Havalia, as it was called. And then there yet remains 3 rivers, he says, that Moses mentions, namely, the Gihon, he says, is the Nile, since it flows through Egypt. Moses includes Egypt in the name Cush or Ethiopia. The Hiddelik is the Tigris, the swiftest of all. The 4th, he says, is Prath, or the Euphrates, that is close to us, since the Euphrates kind of gets closer to Europe than the other rivers. And so you can kind of see, from the Tigris and Euphrates, right, we can still kind of have remnants of that, down to India, like southern India in the east, and then way out in Africa, in Ethiopia, for Kush. I mean, this is the whole sort of known world, right? And so it's not maybe so much that we should think of Eden as a place in the world, but the world as a place in Eden, right? But what he says here is also important. After God had equipped the entire world in various ways, he has also made ready the Garden of Eden, which he intended to be the dwelling place and royal headquarter of man, to whom he had assigned rule over all the beasts. And thus, so he kind of talks about it as being this temple, right? But again, we don't want to allegorize the Garden of Eden out of existence, right? It's a real place, right? Luther understands it that way too. He says, thus, in this passage, we have a destination of paradise with its rivers, but paradise is now completely lost. And that's the reality of the situation. Nothing more remains of it except these 4 corrupted and, as it were, leprous rivers, made so first by sin of man and then by the flood. So these two things take us out of Eden. First, our sin, taking us out of the spiritual Eden that kept the world untainted and unfallen, but also the flood, which changed the various physical, geographical descriptions as totally unrecognizable. So I hope I've been able to show that the Garden of Eden, in a sense, covered the whole world. Eden is not just a physical place, but a spiritual place, a place that is in fellowship with God and created in a real place on the world. Yet it's not something that we can sort of follow the scripture as if it were a map to find a physical garden, as if we could return there and find that angel still guarding the entrance and somehow return ourselves to paradise. right? That's the temptation always for us, to think that we can return to Eden, that we can go back to the beginning, that we can find the secrets, the source of life by our own efforts. This is exactly why Jesus came, to restore Eden, to restore paradise, to restore his creation, to bring about a new heaven and a new earth by his blood. Out of him flows the rivers to life that shall water the whole world and bring us to Eden and the new creation, and even now in the Spirit, in his church, in his mystical body. So please remember to join us then next Sunday as we talk about the fall. God bless.